hello, and welcome back to Spin Cycle Live. I'm your host, Nathan Hale. We are back in the studio that you've come to know and love. And my gosh, do we have quite the amount of stories to cover today on the show. But first, tell me how you're doing. Let me know how the week's going. Today is Monday, March 31st, last day of the month, and the last day of March for Spin Cycle Live. Funny enough how that works, right? We have quite the show for you. I hope you are all doing so good. The weather here is a little bit chilly for me today. It's a little cold. It's a little too cold for comfort for me. But hopefully, if you're, more down south, you're doing a little bit better. I hope you're doing good. I hope you've had some joy and amusement in your life recently, and I hope that this show can bring you a little bit of that joy today. But we should get right into these stories. First off, we are streaming on Instagram, YouTube, Rumble, X, all the platforms. Go follow us on there. Give us a follow on all those different pages. If you want to keep up to date with everything that I'm doing, follow us on X. You can follow both my account at Homonatian and the official X account for Spin Cycle Live at Spin Cycle Live on X for all the updates over there. If you are missing the show, go back and watch previous episodes on YouTube, Rumble. They're also on my X account, but they're a little bit harder to watch there. We have to scroll down the feed and everything. I can't save a folder or something on there for you all. So go onto YouTube. That's probably the best place to watch the playback for the show if you're not watching it live like it is right now. But let's get right into our first episode, or our first story of today. Our last episode of the month, with some international political news coming out of France. So this is it's a little bit small. Let me zoom in on this page a little bit for you. I guess I can. Oh, Breitbart won't let me. All right, so political death sentence for populist Marine Le Pen banned from running in French presidential election by the courts. So this comes from Breitbart News, but it's being recorded a whole bunch of different places. So let's get right into the story. All right. So a Paris court ruled Monday that National Rally leader Marine Le Pen will be ineligible to run for public office for 5 years, likely including in the upcoming presidential race after being found guilty of embezzlement by European Union funds. Oh my gosh, this is so freaking small to read. My eyes can't see it, Breitbart. You got to increase your size. The Paris court found that Le Pen, along with 8 other National Rally members of the European Parliament, had embezzled 2.9 million euros in funds intended for parliamentary assistance for the party in Strasbourg on political operations in France. The court's president found Le Pen personally guilty of embezzling 474,000 euros, Le Monde reported. Le Figaro reports that she was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment, which will likely be served on probation with an electronic tag rather than jail, a fine of 100,000 euros, and 5 years of ineligibility from running for political office. Without waiting to hear the details of her sentence, Le Pen stormed out of the courtroom, very visibly exasperated, and returned to her National Rally Party headquarters in Paris. Speaking last week ahead of the ruling, the National Rally leader said, quote, "I consider myself completely innocent of the fact with which I am accused. Therefore, if my guilt is pronounced, I will use the rule of law to be able to defend my innocence again." However, the court on Monday ruled that the ineligibility to run for public office should come into effect immediately. This means that even if Le Pen were to appeal the decision, the ban would remain in place during the appeal process. Appeals of such sort typically take at least a year, so it's technically possible for the ruling to be overturned before the election occurs in 2027. Should the appeal fail, or indeed the process extended beyond the vote, it would mean that for the first time since 1981, Le Pen would not be running in a French presidential election. Political allies have decried the ruling, accusing the court of interfering in the French democratic process and depriving citizens of the right to choose their own leader. The former leader of the Republicans, who sided with Le Pen's party in last year's legislative elections, Eric Coty, said that, quote, the democratic dynasty of our nation confiscated by an unworthy judicial cabal. So I think that the story is quite interesting. We had the prosecution of Donald Trump here in the United States because of crimes that, are up in the air. Did he do it? Did he not do it? It's tough to say. I have my own personal opinions, but I'm not here to discuss that. I'm here to discuss this story here. And to me, the bigger meaning behind this story is not necessarily did she commit a crime or not. I think the bigger meaning behind it is, does the French government have the right to say who the French people can and cannot vote for in an election, right? They claim that they have a representative democracy, right? And if the people of France feel like this lady can represent them, Miss Le Pen can represent them, then let her represent them, right? Same idea in the United States, right? The whole idea behind, the fact that Donald Trump is back in office proves that, yes, according to the courts, he is a convicted felon, right? But do the American people have the right to elect a convicted felon or not, right? We have a representative government here in the United States. Do we as the people have the right to say who we want to represent us or not, right? In our situation, we chose Donald Trump to represent us, right? We voted for him. We got him as our leader. That is what our leadership looks like. We voted for it. Same thing in France. Who is the French courts? Who are the French government, the French courts, anything to stand between the French people and who they want to vote for president, right? That, I think, is the bigger story behind all of this. I think that there is an argument made on whether she should be receiving prison time or not, or if she in fact did commit these crimes or not. But that's not what I'm so concerned about in this situation. I'm more concerned with seeing that a government is taking the authority to say who cannot represent the French people within their own government. That, I think, is the bigger thing that people should be looking at with this one, and understanding that we have reached a point in our world society where our governments feel that they know better than the people, that they know better than us as to who our leaders should be. And I'm not here to say if Donald Trump is the best leader for the United States, or Marie Le Pen was the best leader or is the best leader for France, right? I'm sure that there are several better options out there. As many of you know, I support Ron DeSantis in the primaries for the presidency, right? But the people ultimately chose Donald Trump. If the people were to choose Marie Le Pen to represent them, that is their choice. That's their reason for doing it. I think this also goes in the bigger idea of, should we be term limiting people? Should we be age limiting our representatives? I am on the fence about term limits for representatives. I think it's fine for the president and everything. I'm more on board with things like age limits, at least for members of Congress, because it goes back to the whole, hey, if the 3rd District of California wants to elect so-and-so to represent them, who am I to say here in Missouri if that should be allowed or not, right? 3rd District of California wants to elect someone who's been in office for 10 terms. They should have the right to do that. That's the people's decision there to do so. Who am I to say, who's the federal government to say if they can and cannot do that or not, right? I get on board with age limits because I'm like, well, I don't think that we should be electing ancient people to be running our government, right? I think we should have a more broad representation within our government in terms of ages, at least. I think that's slowly changing a little bit more and more and more. But I'm interested to see where the story goes in France. I believe they said elections are happening in 2027, so a couple of years from now. So it'll be interesting to see how those elections end up playing out. And I wonder if this will turn into the same thing that happened in the United States, where people really start to rally around Miss Le Pen here as their leader because she's being prosecuted, right? We saw that happen in the United States where Donald Trump starts getting prosecuted and people started rallying around him. He got even more support. He's probably the only person in the world whose polling numbers have gone up because he was convicted of a felony and not gone down, right? So it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out, but we're sure to keep you updated on all of this. Let's go and move on to our next story. This comes from the Daily Wire. So speaking of Donald Trump, a lot of people would like me to. Trump says, quote, there are methods for him to get a third term. This comes from the Daily Wire. President Donald Trump told NBC News on Sunday that he's, quote, not joking about a potential third term, but added it's, quote, far too early to think about another run. Trump, who became only the second U.S. president to win 2 non-consecutive terms, would need the Constitution to be altered for him to be sworn in for a third time. The 22nd Amendment passed by Congress in 1947 after President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected to 4 terms, prohibits presidents from being elected more than twice. However, the 78-year-old president told NBC News that, quote, there are methods that would allow him to effectively be reelected in 2028. When asked, Trump acknowledged that one of those methods would be backing Vice President J.D. Vance in 2028 so that Vance could hand Trump the reins. Quote, that's one method, Trump said, adding, quote, there are others too. The president declined to explain what the other methods could be, according to NBC News, but touted his poll numbers, adding that, quote, a lot of people would like me to run, unquote, run for a third term. Despite remaining slightly underwater, Trump's current job approval numbers are higher than they were at any time during his first term, according to Real Clear Politics Average. As of Monday morning, Trump holds a 47.9% approval rating, his highest approval rating in the RCP average during his first term was 47.2. Pretty good. So, no rational person believes that Donald Trump will run and win a third term in office, or that is even possible, right? No rational person believes this. If you believe that Donald Trump in any possible way out there would be president for 4 more years after 2028, you're losing your mind, right? You're losing your mind. There's no way the Constitution could alter. We're way too polarized. I don't think that any amendment would get through Congress, let alone be approved by the number of states that the amendment needs to be approved by for any constitutional amendment right now in the United States. We're far too divided to agree on something as extreme as altering the Constitution, right? It has been done since the 1990s, right? The early 90s, I think, was the last amendment. And that was about, that was a super nonpartisan issue, though. That was about raising, the salaries of congressmen. It can only be done between elections. It can't be done like the middle of a term or something. So it can only affect like the next like incoming Congress, right? And that was the 27th Amendment, I believe. And that was passed way back in the 90s. I'm pretty sure. I don't have it in front of me right now. You're testing my U.S. history, my U.S. Constitution law knowledge here. But there's no way that would happen. The idea that J.D. Vance would run, win, and then hand the reins over to Donald Trump in one way or another, I don't think that would fly either. I mean, Trump didn't really win by all that much when we consider it in 2024. I mean, he won all the swing states, but it's not like he won an overwhelming majority of the popular vote, right? He only got a few million more votes than Kamala Harris did, which is not all that much percentage-wise. I mean, he didn't even get a full 50% of the total electorate to vote for him. So the idea that J.D. Vance could somehow run on the point of installing Donald Trump in some capacity in 2028, I think that's pretty laughable. Donald Trump is already getting pretty old as it is. So I doubt that would happen. That J.D. Vance would have a single shot of winning. I don't think that J.D. Vance either would stand idly by and run a full presidential campaign knowing that he was just going to step aside for Donald Trump. I don't think he would do that. I think that JD Vance is smart in that. What I want to bring up in this story, though, is that this is just more bad press for Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump needs to start taking the Joe Biden approach of just shutting his mouth and just keep grinding away and doing the work, right? People love Donald Trump because of many of the things. Like, the reason why I voted for Donald Trump are the following, right? He secured the border, okay? I voted for the Trump economy from 4 years ago when he was in office pre-COVID. We're hoping to start looking into that. He's only been in office not even 100 days yet, but we're hoping to get back to that economy at some point. We'll see. But I voted for border. I voted for Trump economy. I voted for the Trump cabinet, right? Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Kash Patel, a lot of these people that were brought in to government. I voted to have Elon go through the government and strip it to bits, right? I voted to have USAID dissolved. I voted to have Tom Homan deporting illegal aliens in this country, right? I voted for all of these things, all these policy aspects that are what is making, I believe, the Trump government really winning and why his poll numbers are up. People really like that aspect, right? But when Donald Trump comes out and says things like, hey, we're going to make Canada the 51st state, right? We're going to conquer Greenland. We're going to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. I want to run for a third term. This is just leverage that the leftist media use against him to make headlines with and say, look, Donald Trump is a tyrant, right? We have Bernie Sanders right now going out and campaigning saying, hey, Trump, this is an oligarchy, right? Trump is a dictator. Trump is willing to stay in office forever. This is just leverage for them to prove that point to be true. And for a lot of these leftists to really have leverage to use against Trump to bring down the agenda, right? This is not the kind of way that someone who wants to win in 2026, who wants to keep Congress, should be talking, right? Trump needs to take the perspective of Joe Biden, shut up like he did on the campaign trail, right? Trump did a great job on his campaign of keeping everything on brand and on message for what he was wanting to accomplish and what he was wanting to do. He was not taking jabs at people on a semi-regular basis. He was being very Trumpy, but in a jokey way. And when he comes out and says things like, I'm serious, I would like to do this, right? Or, Canada, we get the joke, right? It's haha funny. Like, okay, yeah, like people love me so much they want me to run for a third time, right? That's haha funny, right? But to start going out and explaining like, oh, there's ways that we could actually do this. Now all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, you sound serious now that you're wanting to run for a third term here. When we all know that can't possibly be a reality ever. There's no amount of money that I would bet to say that it ever would. So it gives the leftists more leverage to put onto Trump to say this guy's a dictator and to help bring down the agenda of him, when in reality, the agenda has been pretty good so far, aside from a few things. We'll talk about those in a minute. But I've been fairly happy with Trump. I think the majority of Americans have been too. And when you go out and you push things like this, it brings down the perspective of Donald Trump. It brings down the idea of where the administration's at, and it gives the leftists leverage to use against Donald Trump and Republicans going into 2026. Because mark my words, the perspective of the Democrats are going to be in 2026. We're not running against, Republican Congress. We're running against Donald Trump. We're running against not allowing this man to be in office for a third term, right? We're running against all of these things that Donald Trump is for, right? The Democrats in Congress are going to be running against Donald Trump, not against other congressmen. Mark my words on that. We're already seeing it with Bernie Sanders traveling the country with AOC, right? That's all I got to say about that. Let's move on and talk about, let's see, what's our next story? Pam Bondi. So I think this is a great story. So this comes from the Daily Caller. So done with disgrace. Bondi axes Biden-era lawsuit accusing Georgia of racism. Finally getting to see some Pam Bondi news. I was so looking forward to having Pam Bondi as our AG, and I haven't heard anything from her until now. Right, the only things we got were the JFK files, which weren't even that great, and we haven't gotten the Epstein files yet. I'm glad to see she's finally back in the news and she's done something I actually like. Attorney General Pam Bondi directed the Department of Justice to withdraw its claims from a Biden-era lawsuit that accused Georgia of intentionally suppressing black voters at the ballot box on Monday. The INRI Georgia Senate Bill 202 lawsuit, quote, falsely accused Georgia of intentionally suppressing black voters' votes, unquote, according to a Monday DOJ press release. The Georgia Senate bill proposed reforms to strengthen election integrity, including requiring voters to show photo ID, rapid reporting of results, and adjustments to absentee ballot structures. Sounds great. This sounds like this should pass, right? Sounds right. Sounds great, right? Nothing sounds racist about that. Quote, the Department of Justice is done with this disgrace, said Chad Mazzelli, acting Associate Attorney General and DOJ Chief of Staff in the press release. Quote, there is nothing racist about protecting elections. Baseless claims of Jim Crow-style discrimination are the real insult, unquote. Filed by the Biden administration in 2021, the lawsuit alleged the proposed Georgia bill voting procedures would create impositions for black voters to work to suppress their vote. Quote, the right of all eligible citizens to vote is a central pillar of our democracy, the right from which all other rights ultimately flow, said former Attorney General Merrick B. Garland in a press release at the time. Quote, this lawsuit is the first step of many we are taking to ensure that all eligible voters can cast a vote, that all lawful votes are counted, blah, 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 and that every voter has access to accurate information. The DOJ, under the Trump administration, wrote in the press release that accusing Georgia of attempting to, quote, depress the black vote was part of, quote, an untrue narrative, unquote. The statement rails against the former administration for referring to, quote, the basic election legislation as Jim Crow 2.0. Quote, contrary to the Biden administration's false claims of suppression, black voter turnout actually increased under SB 202, Bondi said in the press release. Quote, Georgians deserve secure elections, not fabricated claims of false voter suppression meant to divide us. Americans can be confident that this Department of Justice will protect their vote and never play politics with election integrity. This is great. This is all great. I'm glad to see this lawsuit being thrown out. There was no reason to say that there was any sort of racist part of this. This was simply asking for things like voter ID and more secure elections. And this goes back to what I keep preaching over and over again whenever the left screams about racism, is how degrading must it be if you are a black person or a person of color for that matter, to constantly hear that, oh, you're not smart enough to have an ID. You're not smart enough to know what the laws are in your state. You're not smart enough to know how to be able to vote in your state. That we have to just basically allow anyone to walk up to the ballot booth and cast a vote because, oh, you're not smart enough to be able to figure that out for yourself. So we have to make it extra easy for you, right? How degrading must that be to be a voter, right? And the constant hypocrisy of the left is that, oh, we require IDs to buy alcohol. We require IDs to buy guns. We require IDs to drive cars, right? We require IDs to do a whole lot of things. We require IDs to fly in this country, right? We require an identification of a whole lot of different purposes in this country, but not to vote, right? And it just seems to me that this is just such a logical step to securing elections, is making sure that everyone is using an ID to vote with, right? I would be perfectly fine if you want to issue a whole separate ID that's just for voting. I have no issue with that whatsoever, right? If you want to make a voter ID a little bit easier to obtain than like a driver's license, for example, fine by me. But I think that we all need to have some form of ID to be able to go and vote. We have to know that you're not voting twice. We've seen all sorts of cases that are happening. And it would also be good to know this information for ultimately, tallying up everything, right? All of this is computerized, right? If you go in and you vote and you cast a paper ballot that has your name on it, and the computer has you register and says, yep, you came and voted, and all of a sudden we're adding up all these votes and your name doesn't pop up when we're ultimately tallying up all the votes and everything, we have a problem there, right? What happened between the time that you cast that ballot and when we're adding all the ballots up, right? Now all of a sudden, now it's your name is attached to it, you have an ID and everything attached to it. We can know that information. But if you're going in without identification, we don't know who you are. We don't know if you're actually the person you're claiming to be voting for. We don't know if you're actually living at the address you're actually living in. We don't even know if you're in the state, right? We don't even know if you're in the state that you claim you're from. So I think this is a great move by the Trump Department of Justice. This needed to be resolved. I'm glad it finally was. And that's all I have to say about that. So let's go and move on to our last story of the day. The Wisconsin Supreme Court election. I'm sure many of you have heard Wisconsin's having a Supreme Court election. I believe it's happening tomorrow. And so we'll be covering on Wednesday what those results are. So let's talk about what's at stake in the Wisconsin Supreme Court election. This comes from the Daily Wire. Wisconsin voters will head to the polls on Tuesday to decide the ideological slant of the state's Supreme Court, bringing to a close the most expensive state judicial race in history. That's wild to me, by the way. This is such a big deal. So much money is being poured into this. The race between conservative candidate Brad Schimmel, I think I might be how you pronounce his name, and liberal judge Suzanne Crawford will have nationwide consequences, as Democrats are expected to challenge Wisconsin's current congressional maps if Crawford wins. The outcome could also determine how the court rules on abortion, voter identification laws, and union reforms. There's voter ID again, guys, right? This is a big deal to Democrats. They want illegals to be voting in our elections. That's why they're so against things like voter ID. Schimmel, the former Republican Attorney General of Wisconsin, said, oh, by the way, notice how they're against voter ID in all the swing states. They don't care if it's in states like Missouri or Kansas or Oklahoma, right? They don't care if it's in those states. They only care if it's in Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, the swing states, the states that, the keystone states right now in our country. They only care about if it's in those states, right? You don't hear a peep when Missouri wants to pass voter ID laws. Just want to point that out. Schimmel, the former Republican Attorney General of Wisconsin, said in a recent interview that he is running to save the court from activist judges like Crawford, saying the court has turned into, quote, the most dangerous, quote, unquote, body in state government under its current 4-3 liberal majority. This would be this is a big deal, guys, because if he wins, the court is going to flip to 4-3 in favor of Republicans. Quote, I didn't plan to run for Wisconsin Supreme Court, but in 2023, the liberals took over our court by promising how they were going to rule on cases, and then they've been delivering on that. They've been going through a checklist of a political agenda, he said. Quote, my opponent is their handpicked choice to select a liberal that's retiring, and she's gone so far on the campaign trail and promised to liberal national donors that if she gets elected, she will take out 2 Republican congressional seats and turn those into Democrat congressional seats. That prospect has drawn major donations to the race and sparked action from Elon Musk, who's been actively urging voters in Wisconsin to back the conservative candidates. By the way, Scott Presler has been all over Wisconsin. If you're not following Scott Presler, go follow him on Twitter. Go show him some love. But Scott Presler has been going all over Wisconsin trying to win that race over. So Godspeed to Scott Presler for doing that. And thank God for people like Elon for shoveling a ton of money into this thing. Quote, vote for Super Judge Brad Schimmel in Wisconsin on Tuesday. The Republican House majority is razor thin, and the Democrats want to redraw Wisconsin districts to flip the House and stop the government reforms. Musk posted on X on Sunday. A record-breaking $90 million has reportedly been poured into the race, pitting leftist mega donors like George Soros and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker against Musk, whose America PAC has been very active in the race. The spending total broke the previous held record for most expensive state judicial race when liberals flipped control of the Wisconsin Supreme Court in 2023. Wisconsin Supreme Court's a big deal, guys. clearly from all the money being poured into it. So there's a lot more to the story. I'm not going to read it, just more details on it. But if you are a Wisconsin voter, tomorrow you are voting in this election. Go and vote for the Republican running for the Supreme Court. Go and vote for Brad Schimmel. You need to have him in the Supreme Court. It will just, your state will be immensely better that way. You do not want this lib in your court. Look how she holds the microphone. Look how she holds the microphone like that with those claws. You don't want claw hands in the Supreme Court, do you? You want a man. Look how he's holding that microphone. He's holding that mic. He's like he's gripping that microphone. He's got it in his hand. You want that guy in your Supreme Court. You don't want claw hands in your Supreme Court, right? Go and vote in Wisconsin. Do it, please. Go for it. I believe that Elon's been handing out $100 to people who go and sign some petition if you live in Wisconsin. So if you live in Wisconsin, go sign that, get $100, go and vote and everything. Go do all those things. We will cover this on Wednesday as to how this election plays out. I'm going to be super interested to see how close this is. Trump won Wisconsin in 2024. It'll be interesting to see if those Republican voters show up to vote for this gentleman tomorrow, right? We will see how it goes. I'm excited to see what the results of this are and the implications of whoever ends up winning this race. I have a good feeling that Brad Schimmel will win the race, but we will see. We will be following closely, and we will give you those results first thing on Spin Cycle on Wednesday. But that is all I have for you all today. That's all the stories we got to cover. We moved through these rather quickly. I'm excited to see you all back here on Wednesday. We have election news coming up on Wednesday. We will be able to give you those results then as to what happens when, right? Super interested to see what happens with this race, but I hope you enjoyed the show. Hope we gave you just a little bit of enjoyment today, a little bit of fun. Hopefully it brightened your mood a little bit. It always brightens my mood to talk about all this stuff to you all. Gets it off my chest. Gets me moving and grooving and everything with all these stories and everything. But if you're not already, share the show with friends. Let people know how amazing the show is. Let people know how great my live streams are. Go tell them, Nathan, he's got the best live streams on the internet. He gives the best takes on the internet. Go sing my praises to all of your family and friends. Go retweet me on Twitter. Get me out there to all the people if you want to. If not, that's okay too. We'll have a nice little happy community here with all of our lovely viewers. If you came in late and you missed the show, go and watch us over on YouTube, on Rumble. You can watch the replay of this show on my X as well. You can go see all of our past shows over on those platforms as well. If you missed out on them, join us back here on Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time for the next episode of Spin Cycle Live. In the meantime, go follow me on X. Go follow me on Rumble. Go follow me on Instagram. Go follow me on TikTok at Nathan Hale, at Homo Natian. Look me up on all those places. You'll find my beautiful, lovely face on all of them. But with that, we'll be back here on Wednesday. If you're looking for more updates from me, like I said, follow me on X. That's where I am most active at. I'm always posting all this on X. I'm always on there. I'm always commenting. I'm always posting. I'm always giving the hot takes on stuff, right? I mean, sometimes my takes are a little cold. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I give ones that I think are a hot take, but most people agree with. But every now and then I got a hot take that people agree with, and it blows up. So you won't want to miss all that. But we'll see you back here on Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. I've been Nathan Hale. This has been Spin Cycle Live. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day. We will see you back here on Wednesday.